Hello, welcome to the Decipher podcast. I'm here with my great friend Wendy Nather, and we're here to talk about a little movie called The Martian. One of my favorites, and I know it's one of yours too, Wendy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not talking about the TV series The Martian from way before that, starring the one and only Mr. Hand. No, this is the 2015 movie based on the book by Andy Weir.
That's right. Yes. We're no not my favorite Martian, not any other Martians, the Martian. Right. Exactly. Um Based on, as you said, Wendy, based on one of the best books I've read in a long time. We were talking before we started recording. I read the book after I saw the movie. Because I guess the book was kind of a phenomenon, like right around, like it was published as a serial, which is kind of a cool thing. He was publishing chapters as he wrote them.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
then yeah, so he was publishing the chapters on his blog. And kind of, I don't know what the time frame was, but just kind of sporadically writing because he had a day job. He's a software developer.
Mhm.
So he was just writing when he could and publishing chapters. And eventually somebody he collected it all and published it, I think, as like a Amazon Kindle ebook. And then very quickly a publisher got in touch and said, "Hey, this is great. Let's get you a publishing deal." And then he got a movie deal like within a week.
Mhm.
Somebody
Yeah.
optioned the rights. So that is not how that usually works
Yeah, yeah,
at all.
exactly.
So
Overnight
I know
success.
you've read the book.
Yes, yeah, I've read it several times. Um, I am trying to remember. No, I read the book before I saw the movie, and I just watched it again this week with my oldest.
Yeah,
And we revisited everything we enjoyed so much.
it's so great. I mean, the having seen the movie before I read the book, you do the thing where you're just comparing the two, and you do that if you read the book beforehand too. But based on like the behind the scenes stuff I've seen and everything I've read about it, it looks like they just took his book and put it into screenplay form and shot it. There was not a lot of changes from the book itself. The story obviously is all right there. I think there's some minor character changes and things like that, but mostly it's just you wrote a great story. We're just going to go shoot it.
Yeah, and I think due to the layers of technical detail in there, you
Hmm.
really can't mess with that without having a lot of complaints from the technically accurate people.
It's so true. Scientists will absolutely be the first ones to, yes, shake a fist. A lot like security people. If you get something wrong,
Mhm.
they'd love to tell you about it. We both know that. I know it very well. Um, so we both grew up at a time when the US had a functioning space program, which was really cool.
Yeah,
You're a couple years older than I am, but I remember the late 70s, early 80s. The 80s was kind of the space shuttle era.
yeah.
We were launching space shuttles every other year, it seemed like. Actually, kind of every year for a while. And I remember it really well. It was like one of the defining kind of features of American culture at the time. The space program, like the moon landing was very much a recent memory,
Yeah.
1969. So, like, late 70s, early 80s, people were like, sure, I remember that. And, this is just what we do. We go and do cool shit in space. And we don't, I mean, we still do some cool space stuff, but it's not like this. This is a kind of a little bit of a fantasy of like, we've already put people on Mars. They're, working really hard, doing cool science stuff. And it doesn't look like we're doing that. We're doing that anytime soon.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And reading all of the commentary on no, nobody's going to live on Mars because of the radiation, or y- they're not going to be able to travel there, or
Yeah.
all the different reasons why it won't work. And I'm kind of like, just let me have my fantasy for a minute.
I completely agree. If you look at like the compressed time frame of when the first, unmanned spacecraft went up, then manned spacecraft, and then the US landed on the moon, it was not a long, you know, the Russians put somebody in space, and then like within 10 years, we had a man on the moon. Like that, we used to do things in this world.
Yeah,
We used to,
well, we had somebody to race, so we
true.
did. And it was kind of the age of heroes, all of the test pilots, the crazy, crazy ones who pushed the envelope all over the place, the ones with the right stuff, if you read that book.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, and they just, pivoted and went into space flight. And, we were ready to watch them have those adventures too. I remember when for the moon landing, my dad went out and got our very first color TV, and so he set it up in the living room. We were so excited, and what do you know? The signal from the moon was in black and white.
Thanks, Dad. But
Yeah.
that's awesome. I love that story. That's so good. I think we've talked about this before. Both of our fathers are scientists. I know your dad is like quite a noted figure. If people don't know, I'm more than happy to give you a chance to brag about your dad if you want to. But my dad was a physicist as well and did all kinds of cool stuff that I've talked a little bit about. But tell the people a little bit about like your dad's background and how much of a part of your life that science was.
Oh boy. Well, my dad served in World War II. I think he kind of lied about his age to do it, but he did it. And then he came home and went back to college, and he got a BA in English. And then he was hired as a nuclear physicist at a nuclear facility because there was no certification for stuff like that back
Yeah.
then. So he did that, like, memorizing and calculating using Enrico Fermi's equations in his head in the middle of the night and stuff like that. He went and um, then he invented some testing equipment. He wrote one of the first Fortran compilers, and then he decided to become an astronomer. So he did that for the rest of his career. And so with him as an example, he never gave me a hard time about, well, I don't know what I want to do. I think I'll just go try this.
Yeah. And it's such a great, I mean, that's a great lesson for anybody, but that kind of arc that you just described of like, yeah, I went to college, I studied English, but like there's lots of cool stuff happening in over here in this science world that I'm interested in. And as you said, like that was at the beginning of the nuclear age where like we didn't have nuclear physicists, like we didn't have a whole, cohort of trained people doing this stuff. So you could just like raise your hand and be like, can I do that? Like I'm smart. Let me give it a shot. Which is really cool. I mean, it's very close to like my dad's kind of arc too. Like he studied physics in college, but then went into the army and was stationed in Huntsville, Alabama for a while. And his time there overlapped with Werner von Braun and that whole
Hmm.
cohort of German scientists who had we had brought over after World War II. And I don't think he worked directly with von Braun, but he was there at the same time working on different projects, worked on ballistic missile defense and stuff tangentially related to the space program. But this stuff was such a huge part of my childhood, just knowing that like there were people that, like my dad and people he worked with that were doing this kind of work. It was like, yeah, they were super cool, but it wasn't like, pie in the sky. Like this stuff, it was like realistic work. We were just going and doing this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And everybody knew, when they were working those fields, they knew all the players. Everybody knew each other. It wasn't
Mhm.
that big a community back then.
Very true. The other thing that was a big part of, I think, both of our childhoods was movies about space.
Mhm.
This is kind of that era, 70s, 80s, when it seemed like just about 80% of the movies that were in the theaters at all times were some kind of space epic or science fiction
2001.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I did one of these podcasts a couple weeks ago with Wade Baker and Rich Mogul about Star Wars,
Ah, yeah.
and obviously a seminal movie for a lot of people of our generation. But there were just so many of these in the 80s, and then we kind of stopped doing that. But The Martian, which came out I think 11 years ago now, like 2015.
2015, yeah.
Yeah, kind of brought it back in a big way because
Mhm.
it was, yeah, it's a space movie and there's a lot of science and a small bit of science fiction involved, but it's also just a very human story of this guy is in a really bad situation and he's got to figure it out. You
He's
know,
gotta science the shit out of it,
that's
which
exactly
is just,
right.
the epitome of a hacker if ever there was one.
That's right. That's exactly why I wanted to do this movie because it's the whole entire encapsulation of the hacker mindset of like, I've got a thorny problem in front of me, or maybe a series of them, and I have to figure this out on my own. I might get a little bit of help from the outside at some point, but I've got to take these tools that I have at my disposal, figure out how to repurpose them, and solve this series of problems so that I don't die in one of any number of horrible ways up here.
Yeah,
There's
just kludging things together, and I
yes,
love that it's realistic in that, yeah, things do go wrong, and, he forgot to carry the one, or he forgot the oxygen that he was
yes,
exhaling, and forgot to put that in his calculations, so he had, an off by one error that coulda killed him, and I
very
love
true.
those things were in there too.
Yeah, there's a couple of great scenes. The one you just described where he kind of figures out, Matt Damon's character, Mark Watney, figures out how he can create water,
Mhm,
through this whole, science experiment of burning hydrogen and oxygen and all of this. But then he blows himself up as soon as he starts to do that because he forgot to account for the oxygen that he was exhaling. And before that, there's the scene right when he sort of gets back to the spacecraft after things have gone all to hell at the beginning and his crew has left him behind, where I think it's the first time he's talking into the camera and he's saying,
yeah, he's back in the hab,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And he says, um, I have to figure out how not to die of hunger, how not to die of thirst, how not to suffocate. And if all of that goes exactly right, then maybe they'll come and get me in 4 years or
mhm,
whatever the time
right,
frame is.
yeah.
So I have to figure out how to grow enough food and create water and all this kind of stuff. And you just see him with this dead-eyed 1,000-yard stare into the camera of like, I don't really know how to do all that. And this is before you know what his specialty is or,
Yeah.
how dumb or smart he is. You assume he's smart because he's an astronaut, but we don't know what his science background is at that point or anything. He's just like, here's a bunch of problems. I'm going to try not to die up here alone.
And we keep hearing over and over again, this reminds me so much of Apollo 13, which was also a great example of kludging things together to, during an emergency. And I kept hearing in both movies over and over again, work the problem. Let's
Mm-hmm.
work the problem. And you can tell that when he sits down, that's the first thing he's going to do. And, you work one problem and then you work the next one and then you work the next one.
Yeah. And they bring it back really well at the end of the movie in that scene at the astronaut training center where he says that in his opening statement to these candidate astronauts of like, yes, you're going to be up there and everything's going to go to hell and you have to look at it the way you just described, Wendy. You find a problem, you work that problem, and if you solve enough of those problems you get to come home, and if you
Yes.
don't then you're a skeleton on Mars. But yeah, you're exactly right about the Apollo 13 thing too. I watched that, within the last month as well. And the very famous scene right when things go to hell on that flight and Tom Hanks says, Houston, we've had a problem. And one of them, I think it's Bill Paxton's problem or character sort of like freaks out a little bit. And, Tom Hanks says, calm down. Let's start working the problem. Like,
Yeah.
because otherwise we're going to die right now. And
Yeah.
that kind of level-headed logical thinking is, you have that. I don't really have it as much as I would die very quickly in space.
I'm sure I would too. But there's another parallel between Apollo 13 and The Martian that I just love. There's a callback in The Martian to actually the line about Rich Purnell being a steely eyed missile man.
Yeah.
And that was actually a quote about a gentleman named John Aaron who first saved Apollo 12's bacon by because he read everything. He read all the documentation, and so he, as soon as something they were hit by lightning and they lost telemetry, he figured out immediately how to fix that. That's what earned him the moniker, because he was so cool working the problem. He was a steely-eyed missile man, and then he did it again for Apollo 13, helping them figure out how to kludge that stuff together. So I loved seeing, and I got to explain it to my oldest, that steely eyed missile man line is real and it's referring to a real person.
Yeah, I love that too. The first time I saw this movie was actually with my kids and my wife. We watched it maybe whenever it came out on cable or HBO or something, maybe a year after it had come out in the theater. My kids were, I don't know, probably in like middle school and high school at the time. And the same thing, that line like rung a bell in my head. I was like, why do I know what that
Yeah.
line is? And I had to quickly look it up, and I explained it to them. They're like, oh, that's really cool that they like incorporated. There's a few other things in this movie too that they brought in from real life and, kind of real astronauts experience, with the Apollo missions and things like that. But yeah, I love that as well. There's just those little callbacks, and that's a testament to Andy Weir's writing, and also just like the power of that kind of storytelling, that
Yeah.
you can have those callbacks that really like ring true in a film like this.
And he was having fun with it, you could tell.
Yeah.
I mean, that they managed to fit a good amount of snark into the movie, even though you couldn't get all of the interior monologue that was in the book. But you got a lot, and it kept it from being one of the a terrible, scary drama, with two-dimensional heroes and everything. Um, I
Yeah.
suspect we both just identified so much with both with Mark Watney, and I identified a lot with Commander Lewis.
Mm.
Um, being responsible for the team and taking everything on herself, and then people at NASA and all of the politics about, do we tell them, do we not tell them, do we go behind his back? Um, it feels so much like things that we do every day in security.
It's so true. Yeah, there's the tension. There's, probably three different sources of tension in this movie. There's, is Mark Watney going to die on this planet? The first time you're watching this, you don't totally know. You assume they're not going to kill Matt Damon on Mars, so you're probably pretty sure he's going to survive. But there's also the tension of all the people on the ground at NASA, JPL, trying to figure it all out, but also the internal bickering of like, a little bit of a power struggle between Sean Bean's character and Jeff Daniels' character, that kind of, is the central tension there.
And Sean Bean didn't even die once in this movie. Not even once.
Which is rare for him. He
Yeah.
almost, in almost every other thing he's in, he gets killed in some terrible way.
Yeah,
And
early on. Yeah.
early on, it's also one of the rare movies where he's playing a present day person and not someone in Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or, Odysseus or something like that, you know.
Right.
But yeah, there's all those different sources of narrative tension in this movie. And I sometimes I find myself, I'm like, all right, enough with the like NASA shit on the ground. Can we get back to Watney doing science on Mars? But then there's so many good scenes with, Donald Glover's character, Rich Parnell,
Yes.
who I really wanted more of. He's so good. He's so funny, and just like absolutely mirrors probably 20 people that we both know that are
Yes.
absolute geniuses and have like zero respect for authority, and are just like, look, I already solved your problem. What are you guys arguing about? Like, I
Yeah.
already figured this out. Like, what are we all doing here? Let's go do this. Like, the scene that I think they call the Council of Elrond,
Yeah.
where, just a great one with,
Project Elrond. Yeah.
yes, that's it. That has Jeff Daniels, the NASA director, Donald Glover's character, Kristen Wiig's character, um, and
Benedict Wong, don't forget him.
Sean Bean, and yes, Vincent Kapoor are all in this
Oh, yeah,
uh,
Vincent
in the
Kapoor.
conference room and trying to figure out if there's a way for them to get him back more quickly. And Rich Purnell just stands up and starts moving people around the room to demonstrate the slingshot maneuver. And he says to Jeff Daniels, "What's your name again?" He's like, "So and so. I'm the director of
Director
NASA."
of
And he's
NASA.
like,
Oh,
"Cool,
okay, whatever.
cool, yeah. Let me get your pen. Stand over there. You're the moon," or something like that. Just the offhanded, kind of brilliance that those people have. Like it's a great portrayal because those people are absolutely real.
And it cracks me up, especially when they got to the part of um, mid politics. Teddy Sanders says, and you're just doing this because Vincent Kapoor isn't here; he's over at JPL. But I said, in the last scene, you just showed a Cisco WebEx video. Why can't you just get on the video? Um,
Yes.
that was one bobble that I had a problem with, but I notice whenever the Cisco logo's on something.
I yes, that was a little jarring to me too. I had forgotten about that, but it shows up quite a bit in this movie. Yeah, but they do such a nice job of portraying everybody as a fallible human. Even the smartest people in the
Hmm.
story, they're all brilliant to some degree, as having real human faults. Jeff Daniels' character has to worry about the sort of public facing politics of all of this. When do we tell the public that he's still alive? When do we tell the crew that he's still alive? Sean Bean is worried about that kind of stuff too. And everybody's got these kind of internal problems they're struggling with, along with Commander Lewis, Jessica Chastain's character, who you mentioned, who kind of takes it all on herself for leaving him behind because, ultimately it was her, order to
Her
the rest of
call.
the. Yep,
Yeah.
right. You know, they were just following her directive, which is a way that good leaders think, but it's also those other astronauts, of course, feel some guilt for that as well.
Yeah, and it kind of illustrates for me the difference that gets discussed between intention and impact. And you can see this going through her head. Like, obviously, she didn't intend to leave him behind, but that was the impact. That
Right.
was the result.
Yeah.
And
What was
you
the
just have to
outcome?
own that, and you have to keep going.
Right. And that a worse version of this movie dives deep into like the psychological impact on all those astronauts and how they show her just like with her head in her hands staring out the window into space on the space station for minutes at a time. But you get a little flash of her. There's the scene of them all realizing that he's still alive,
Mhm.
and then they get on with it. They're like, okay, what are we going to do about it? Like, are we turning around to go get him? Yes. We all vote
Yeah,
yes.
they
Let's go.
take a minute to process, and then they're like, "Okay, our minute's over. Now let's get back to work. Let's work the problem."
Right. It's a very, you know, logical, almost ruthless mindset of like, okay, there's only two outcomes here. Either we go get him or he dies in some terrible fashion that we
Mhm.
can all imagine and we've all trained for.
Yeah.
So I don't remember whose character it was, but somebody was like, it's not even, we're going. Like,
Mhm.
we got to go.
Mhm.
Whether it's right now or we figure out this other plan that NASA has. But they do a really nice job with that. They show the human impacts, but they don't just dwell on it. Like you kind of get the point.
Yeah, yeah. It's very businesslike. And I'd just like to point out how many Marvel Cinematic Universe actors are in this movie together. You have Benedict Wong, who I love.
It's
You've
the
got
best.
Sebastian Stan, also. Um, you've got Chiwetel Ejiofor,
Hmm.
um, and you've got
Matt Damon's in some Marvel movies
yes,
as
that's right. That's
yeah,
right. He has a couple of cameos
yep.
in the in the Thor
Yeah,
movies. Um, and yeah, just watching all of that and going, wow, how many of them have worked together in Hollywood and then they're just all, penned up together doing this movie.
it's I wrote down in my notes watching this. I've seen this movie probably like 15 times all the way through, and fragments of it dozens and dozens of times. But in my notes, I wrote down that this is probably the best looking astronaut crew that's ever been
Yes,
assembled in human history.
they're so glamorous. You're
Oh
right.
my God. There's they cut to like Jessica Chastain and Kate Mara and yeah, Sebastian Stan and Michael Pena, all these people, you're like,
Oh
these are
yeah,
just,
Michael Pena. He was
yeah,
also Marvel. Yeah.
right. Ant-Man and the Wasp. Just like, these are the best looking people on Earth, and just have them all in this space station.
What are the odds?
Right. Yes. I mean, I've seen what astronauts look like. They don't typically look like those people.
Oh, another thing that my dad did was for a little while he was teaching astronomy to the NASA astronauts during their training.
Oh, just a little while.
Just a little while, and then he actually got annoyed with the NASA bureaucracy and stopped doing stuff for them.
I don't think that's unusual. I mean, bureaucracies, I don't know what year that was, but government bureaucracies multiply, and they they've been known to drive out a few brilliant minds in their time. Yeah.
How often do you think that happens in cybersecurity?
I mean, we certainly know a few people it's happened to, for sure. I think it happens relatively often. In the government world, I'm not sure. In the corporate world that we live in, I think it happens pretty often, especially if you're one of, kind of the independent minded hacker persona of
Mhm.
like, I do this one thing, I do it really well. Let me go do that thing. And then they start putting you into 6 hours of meetings every day, and you can't do that thing that you're good at.
Yeah.
Incredibly frustrating. And I've been in that position. You've been in that position. A lot of our friends have. And I think that's a really good question, Wendy. It's a good parallel. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, um, if you think about not just corporate cybersecurity, but also what CISA is going through right now,
sure.
you pointed out that those people are still working the problems even though they're not getting paid.
Yeah. And, in some ways are kind of under hostile
Hostile
pressure.
fire. Yeah.
Yeah. From their own administration. And in some cases. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I watched this movie a couple times over the weekend, and I'm also rereading The Cuckoo's Egg by Cliff Stoll right now,
Oh, yeah.
just
Classic.
for, I don't really know why. I'd kind of run out of things to read, and I was like, you know what? I haven't read this in a few years. I'm going to pick it back up. And there's so many parallels in there too, like the astronomy part of it. For
Mhm.
people that haven't read that book, I mean, he was a PhD astronomer and
Mhm.
astrophysicist who got, essentially shuffled off to a computer lab for funding reasons, and wound up in this, insane cyber espionage story. But kind of the same thing of like, here's the 75-cent accounting error. What caused that?
Yeah.
We
Now I
know all the,
gotta know. I gotta figure this out.
yeah,
Does it matter? It was like, pennies off, but it doesn't make sense to me. Therefore, I need to investigate.
right. I'm going to sleep on the floor of this computer lab literally for like weeks at a time until I figure this out. And even when he did, like, people didn't believe him, and that the whole thing, the FBI was like, we don't care. It's
Yeah.
75 cents. We don't it's not our problem. But yeah, it's the same idea of like persistence and just problem solving that is required for people in our field. And that's why I think this movie, you know becomes more and more resonant for me every time I go back to it.
Yeah. It reminds me of a lot of situations that we find ourselves in where we go, wow, that just happened. Okay. Now what do we do?
Yes.
because who knew that thing was going to happen? There's new stuff every day, and it's like, really,
Yeah.
that just happened, really?
So much of that. Yeah. I mean, I hate talking about AI, but I think that's a pretty good example right now of like that kind of just happened in an 18-month span. And now
Mhm.
everybody's trying to figure out what the hell to do about it. Like, how do we secure these agents? How do we, I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole we could go down there, but that's the most current example that, I could come up with of like, this is a disruptive force that's making people rethink the way that they, protect their networks and do their jobs in a lot of cases.
Mhm. And that all sorts of things that we run into, like, cascading failures,
Oh,
dependencies that are not mapped. There's no way to map all of them, and so one of them just makes itself known, and 1,000 organizations go down because of that one dependency. So there's so many things that, in hindsight, you might have been able to predict, but who has time for that?
yeah. I have cascading failures written in my notes too, just in
Oh, really?
all block letters. Yeah, of course, because it's just sort of in the behind the scenes thing that I watched. There was a little short interview with Andy Weir, the author, who said that the original idea for this book came to him. He was just he was at his day job thinking about like, I wonder if we'll ever put somebody on Mars, and then he started thinking about how we would get there. Like we had sent probes at this time. Like, how would people live there? And then what if they ran out of water or food or oxygen? And then he thought, well, why don't I just give all of those problems to one character and and see what happens? And that's how you get Mark Watney just, getting kicked in the literally punctured in the stomach and,
Yeah.
blowing himself up and
Mark
um
Watney, full stack astronaut
right. And crash test dummy.
and
Yeah.
crash test dummy. Another thing that I really appreciate about it is, not just the different forms of narrative tension and everything, but Matt Damon really did a good job. He was able to convey so much with just breathing, because you
Yes.
heard so much of him just breathing inside the suit. And
There's so much of that. I mean, this movie fails miserably if they don't have Damon in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure there's other people that could have done it, but he's got that perfect mix of you take him seriously as an actor, but he can be funny too,
yeah,
obviously. And he's acting against a green screen almost the entire movie. Aside from the very beginning and the very end, it's him talking into a GoPro or acting against, a VFX backdrop. And he's got to convey a lot, yeah, with just facial expressions or grunts or, yeah, like how rapid his breathing is in the spacesuit or just like exasperated gestures or
yeah, annoyed breathing. There's desperate breathing. There's painful breathing. You could just sit there and take notes of all of the different ways in which he conveys what's going on.
it's so
And
true. Yeah. It's any little piece of this movie, like they almost didn't get Ridley Scott because he had a scheduling conflict and it was gonna be directed by Drew Goddard, who was the screenwriter, but he went off to do some other movie, so they shifted the schedule and got Ridley Scott, which
mhm,
worked out great. And as
yeah,
soon as that happened, Matt Damon said, "Oh, you got Ridley Scott? I'm in."
mhm,
So you got, Ridley Scott and Matt Damon, you're 85% of the way to a hit, you know?
yeah,
Especially in 2015, just at the top of their game. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I
Don't
want
say they peaked in 2015.
absolutely
That
not.
would hurt their feelings.
Nope. At the top of their game. I didn't say they came down.
Okay.
They're up there. I wanted to the thing that cracks me, there's a few like extremely funny scenes in this to me, and one of the nerdiest funny ones is when he's trying, like he's got the camera, he's figured out Pathfinder, he's dug it up, and he's trying to
Yeah.
figure out how he's going to communicate with NASA on the ground instead of these yes no questions with the camera. And he lands on hexadecimal and ASCII.
Yes.
And he goes digging through the other astronauts things, and he's like, I knew one of you nerds would have an ASCII table laying around,
Yes.
which
And there
it's
it is.
there it is. Yes. And I thought to myself, I was like, okay, there was a time in my life where I basically understood ASCII. That time is long past now. I went and looked it up. I was like, oh God, this is giving me PTSD. But the fact that, like, he knows that this is going to work, but he has to, even the people on the ground are like, they're looking at a table
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
They don't know. I don't know that anybody just,
I knew somebody who used to work at Belcour who did have it memorized.
oh my God. Of
And
course you
he
do.
could dictate things in hexadecimal. Of course,
That's
I would have to look it up, but
I think any normal person would have to look it up, even even scientists and astronauts, of course.
mhm.
But the idea that they land on that, which is a really elegant solution to a very thorny problem, because they have the ground control guy who's in that conversation with Vincent Kapoor, who's like, well, all he can do is point the camera at yes or no. This isn't exactly going to be the Algonquin roundtable
Yeah,
discussion. And
right.
Vincent Kapoor's like, are you kidding me? Just do it. He's like, figure this out. So they kind of land on that. And Matt Damon's the one that, Watney figured it out, not the people on the ground. He's like,
Mhm.
I got it. Hexadecimal, while
Yeah.
he's eating his 5,000th potato
Yeah, well, yeah, his 500th, potato, and
dipped
and
in
and love
Vicodin.
when he runs out of ketchup and he dips one in crushed Vicodin. He said, "'Cause
Yes.
there's nobody who can stop me."
It's so funny. I watched the extended cut, which you can rent on Amazon right now, and it's there's, I don't know, maybe about 8 or 10 extra minutes, and there's no big like extra scenes or anything. It's just kind of a little bit added to various scenes.
Mm.
Some extra dialogue, and there's some extra one-liners, and they kind of hold that shot a little longer, where he's like putting the the potato in the Vicodin. He's like, I ran out of ketchup like 8 days ago. And nobody can stop me.
It
It's
was
those the little touches like that
yeah.
that add the humor, that takes like a very serious science-based story and just takes it up so many different notches for me.
Now, I liked it when he decided, and worked through it and showed his work, then and explained why he's a space pirate. But I don't know if you this may not have happened to you, but I started thinking, well, why didn't they call him the space cowboy?
Of course I thought
And
about that.
we could have called him Maurice.
Yep.
And now I've had that song stuck in my head all day getting ready for this podcast.
I love it.
Andy Weir went, no, that's too weird even for me.
Probably did, honestly. Or I don't know. Like, I don't remember from the book. I'm sure that some of the disco jokes were in there about Commander Lewis's music. I
Oh,
don't
yes, they
remember.
were. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Because that was one of the other things that I think put this movie up a notch for me, was the soundtrack.
Hmm.
Because, like, that is not my music. Like, I don't love ABBA or, all that, but it fits so well. Every needle drop is just such a perfect fit for where they place it in the movie. And the running joke of him just talking shit about Commander Lewis's musical taste and
Yes.
how terrible it is just great. It just adds that extra layer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the scene where he's driving around in the Rover and Waterloo comes on, the ABBA song, and they play the
Yeah.
entire thing. It's like 3 minutes of him just driving around to that song.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like happily sweating with that, degrading nuclear bomb behind him, essentially.
Hmm. Yeah. And then him going from sweating to freezing and then back again. And um, yeah, again, playing a character who is completely isolated
Hmm.
for almost all the movie, and you can't expose some of the you can't play some of the emotions by talking to people because you're not talking to anybody. He had to do it in so many different ways, and you see parts where he almost loses it and then he gets back to it, and then finally when he's waiting to blast off for them to catch him, that's when he finally breaks down.
Yeah, that's a really effective scene. That's another one that could have gone badly. It could have been like overly saccharine, but just, the tension of him sitting in this capsule that he's taken all the roof off of, and he's, he knows it's probably not going to go perfectly. And, Commander Lewis is like, "We're almost there, Watney. Hang on 1 minute." And he's like, "Okay, can't wait to see you guys." And he's crying. Like,
Yeah,
it's really great. You can feel all the pent up, like, I don't remember how long he's been there at that point, like a year and a half or something like that.
yeah. What was it, 18 months?
Yeah.
And also that was the scene where he no longer had control of anything. He
Yes.
had to wait, for his colleagues to come back and catch him. The only thing he could do was hang on. Whereas for the previous 18 months, he could keep busy working the first problem and the next and the next and the next. He was all done there. It was out of his hands. And I could really feel, the interiority of him thinking about everything that he just lived through, everything that he just survived, and crying, finally letting himself cry because of that.
That's exactly right. That's so well said, Wendy, because that entire 18 months or whatever it was, he was independent. Yes, he was alone, but he could do whatever he wanted, essentially. Like, he
It's
had tasks.
Vicodin.
Yeah, right. Eat Vicodin for breakfast, but he had things to do. He woke up every morning and he was like, "Okay, I have to make water. I have to make food. I have to not suffocate. I have to go do all these things." And then once that was all done and he was sitting in that seat, he's like, "Okay, well, now it's in Martinez's hands. He's
Yeah.
the one that's going to be controlling this capsule remotely. I've got to rely on these people again. And they're the jerks that left me on Mars in the first place." you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you could feel all of that kind of tension release right in that moment. And it's a perfect encapsulation. What a terrible pun, but of the whole thing.
Encapsulation.
Yeah,
Well done, Dennis.
I didn't
Well,
mean to, but it just happened. It happened. The other part that I hadn't forgotten, but I forgot like how complex it is when they actually have to go and retrieve him. Like after he's like, they blast him off, and then very quickly they figure out, oh shit, he's going way too fast,
yeah.
or we're going way too fast. The relative velocity is way too fast, and he's much farther away from us than we
Yeah.
thought because the trajectory was off. And
Yeah. Because of the tarp coming off, which again, who saw this coming?
a convertible spaceship. What a
A
great
convertible
idea.
spaceship. Yeah.
Yes. But then really quickly the space station crew improvises, and Jessica Chastain says to, the German, I can't remember the character's name, is like, "Hey, can you build a bomb
Yeah.
with what we have
His
on?"
name is Fogel.
Yes, thank you. And he's like, "Well, yeah, but I have to point out that building a bomb on a space station is a really terrible idea. I'm not sure I should do that." And then they, essentially
He's in the
intentionally,
kitchen and he's doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
yeah, he's like easy bake oven bomb in the space station with Kate Mara. And
Yeah.
then they blow off the vacuum lock so that they can decelerate the space station. Space station is not the right word, but the craft that they're on,
Yeah.
to reduce the relative velocity and distance between the two of them. And then Lewis goes out there and they, even that goes badly because she misses him at first, but reels him in with the strap. But
Yeah, I mean, she tries to grab him, and their hands,
yeah,
don't grab, but he grabs the tether, and they manage to. And I love, the physics of them
yeah,
as they get closer and closer to each other. They're spinning faster and faster, which is what is supposed to happen.
yeah. The slow motion kind of reunion where they're just kind of orbiting each other was really well done.
Yeah,
Um, and the kind of end of the movie where, they don't spend a ton of time on it. Once he gets back on the space station, they're all happy for about 25 seconds, and then they kind of like cut to the celebration on Earth, and then that last scene that I mentioned with him teaching the astronaut class, which is a great little coda. It kind of wraps it all up in a really nice way.
I think also what really got me is, dissolving to being on Earth, and you see that they've all made it back. He's just sitting there against all that green, and that is
Yes.
such a huge difference. And that's all you have to say
Right.
on
And
Earth.
it's so true. And he looks down at his feet, and there's a little tiny
Yeah.
sprout of something coming up through the gravel. And he repeats the line. He says, "Hey there," like he said to the potato, I think, when he was,
Yes. Yes. Like the first potato plant. Yeah.
yeah, poop farming on Mars. We, we kind of skipped over or forgot to mention the entire, subplot, not subplot, but portion with the Chinese space agency.
Yes, that was really good too.
It's so well done because, and I always forget about it right in the middle of the movie, like the resupply thing that NASA sends up there just explodes 20 seconds after launch, and they're kind of like, well, that we're screwed. He's dead. We're gonna look like fools. And then, the the
The
Chinese
deputy
space
director,
agency
yeah, and she
kind of
said,
comes to the rescue
yeah,
and says, well, we have this technology that they don't have, but if we help them, we're going to be declassifying this and giving them an advantage. And the woman is like, well, we kind of have to do that. We can't just let this guy die up there knowing we could have helped him, you
yeah, and
know?
I love that the actual the director is on the same wavelength, and it's a nice warm moment where they know they're going to help. It's
Yeah.
not another area of tension. It's not that, there's nothing stereotyped about the Chinese there, and oh, they're just going to mess with the Americans or anything. No, they're doing something very human and very generous, and I love that.
I did too. It's really, yes, that could have gone sideways very easily. And there's a line that, Benedict Wong's character says, where I think he says, "Thanks to my uncle Tommy, we get an extra
Yes.
chance at this." And I remember the first time I watched this thinking, that can't be his actual uncle, right? And he was being, facetious.
Mhm.
But I was like, that's a little too convenient if the director of the Chinese space agency is this character's uncle. But he's, but yeah, it's really well done because you see the cooperative spirit that actually, gets things done.
Mhm.
It's very difficult to succeed by yourself, even if you're NASA. You you usually
Yeah.
need help from somebody else.
And that's the spirit that makes the space station work. It's, what made the whole space program continue to evolve, and
Mhm.
it's what makes cybersecurity work when we kind of put aside those borders and say, look, the right thing to do is to help each other.
It's very true. I mean, the cliche that's come up in the last like 10 years about cybersecurity being a team sport is a cliche for a reason because it's true. As you
Mhm.
just mentioned, you can't get very far in this field on your own. You just can't. It's much too difficult, and there's too many outside forces and too many unknowns. And even, people as experienced as you, there's lots of things that just aren't your area of expertise, and you need other people to help you.
Mhm.
It's a lot more fun when you're doing things with other people too, as
And
we
you
both
want to
know.
share what you know when you figure something out. I mean, we're all figuring things out as fast as we can.
Yeah.
And when you figure something out, you want to share it so that somebody else doesn't have to go through the same agony that you did.
That's exactly right, and, they portray that really well at the end of this movie where when Damon's character is teaching that class, and you can see the joy on his face of getting to tell these stories
Yeah.
to these, 25-year-olds in this classroom setting. And, the last shot of the movie is him saying, "Okay, any questions?" And every hand in the room
Yeah.
goes up. Yes.
Yeah.
Every single person has a question, which is just great. It's perfect. So you mentioned early on that we're kind of doing this. We're recording this, I think, 2 days before Project Hail Mary actually comes out in most of the country.
Mhm.
Neither one of us has seen it yet. Hopefully, by the time people, actually gets to this, they will. But I'm dying to see it. I read that book. I absolutely loved it. I was knocked out by it. It was so good. I think it's better than The Martian. They're different, but I probably enjoyed it more. They're both great, but I'm everything I've heard about that movie so far is just like 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. It's a
Yeah,
haven't heard a
it's
bad
getting
word
great
about it.
reviews,
Yeah,
and I heard that Ryan Gosling actually got the movie rights before the book was actually published, and he's been working on making this movie for like 6 years.
that's crazy. That I mean, I really enjoy him. Like he's such a versatile guy, and he's got that sense of humor too that Damon has.
Yeah.
That kind of sly, like knowing look or sarcasm that's not malicious. It's just kind of like this cheeky, mischievous.
Good-natured snark.
Totally, yes. He can't be mean. He's Canadian, so
Yes.
yeah. I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be great. So that I think it'll be a perfect companion to this movie too.
Mhm. A lot of hackery going on there too, except
Oh,
more
good.
hardware. Well, no, maybe not more hardware, about the same.
Yeah, a lot of hardware in Project Hail Mary. I mean, they're not to spoil any, they're manufacturing things in that movie or in
Mhm.
that story. There's a lot of stuff going on. They're even in a worse position than Mark Watney was in this movie, you know? It's just one guy dying in The Martian. In
Yeah,
Project Hail Mary, it's many, many more.
everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, spoiler, everyone. Um, all right, Wendy, thank you so much for doing this. It's great to see you. I love having you on here. And I'll see you next week in
I will see
person.
you next week, and maybe we can sneak off and go watch Project Hail Mary.